Good afternoon and welcome to the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership webinar, the past, present, and future of the Sauk River Watershed District's youth and adult outreach programs. I'm Joe Noner. I'm the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership Coordinator. And before we get started, I'd like to share a little bit of information about the partnership and logistics for the webinar before we get started. The Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership hosts these lake conservation webinars to share science, management, and outreach efforts among our partners. You can keep up to date with the webinars by checking out our webinars page at midwestglaciallakes.org. Webinars in the series will be added to our webpage along with other webinars of interest, with about 20 webinars going on this year. We send notifications for the webinars through our Mglp quarterly newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website. If you'd like to share your own experiences or project results through a webinar like this, please reach out to me, Joe Noner, nonerj@michigan.gov, and my address is on the screen here as well. A little bit about the Mglp, if you're unfamiliar. We're a partnership of professionals and stakeholders focused on conserving the over 40,000 glacially formed inland lakes across an 8-state region in the upper Midwest. And our mission is to protect, rehabilitate, and enhance sustainable fish habitats in glacial lakes of the Midwest for the use and enjoyment of current and future generations. Partnership does a couple of things. We provide science for lake conservation, such as our conservation planner, which provides information about every lake in the partnership. We do outreach and education for stakeholders and professionals through webinars, news releases, Twitter conversations, and sharing materials related to lake conservation, such as our shoreline living document. And we fund science, outreach, and education and on-the-ground rehabilitation and protection projects through our Lakes Conservation Grant, which is released every year. And it's currently out for, there's a request for proposals out. We've got about $300,000 that we anticipate giving out. So if you've got a lake conservation project that you think would be a good fit, check out the Lake Conservation Grant webpage or reach out to me for more information. Just a few logistics about today's presentation. It should last about 30 to 45 minutes and we'll hold most of the remaining time for questions. We'll hold questions until the end of the webinar, so all participants are going to be muted throughout the webinar. If you do have a question, please use the question and answer function to submit it. And you can access the question and answer function by hovering your mouse over the screen. And then if you look at the bottom of the screen, there's a Q&A button. Just click that and submit your question. And we'll be moderating those questions along the way. We'll try to make sure that we get to them all. And we'll be answering those questions mostly at the end. If for some reason you have any technical difficulties, or if you'd like to share this webinar with others that couldn't attend today, we will post a video to the webinars page of our website within a week or so. So check back to there and you should be able to find a link to a YouTube video. Today's speaker is Helm. Over the past 15 years, Adam's worked to inform and educate about the impacts of human activity on water quality. He's learning by doing and promoting through experience, and that's his approach to environmental education. His ultimate goal through outreach at the Sauk River Watershed District is to inspire people to improve their little pieces of the bigger picture while having fun and adding a lot of humor. With a background in fisheries and experience teaching difficult students, a career working with and for local units of government seemed like a natural fit for Adam. Adam's presentation is a natural fit for us here at the Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership, of course, because it fits into both our outreach and education initiatives and our conservation of shorelines with property owners that are have riparian properties on lakes. So I'm very excited to learn more from Adam, and I hope you are as well. With that, Adam, I will turn the controls over to you, and I will look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for the intro. Thanks for everybody that's here. If I can get the first slide, there we go. So I'm going to chat about the Sauk River Watershed. I'll go through some basics, some background about us, into the outreach program, and then mostly focus on the education program, which is one of our biggest programs, kind of our focus at the watershed. And at the end, I'll talk about how COVID pretty much blew up the whole program and we had to redo stuff the last the last year, just like everybody else did. So if you don't know where the Sauk River Watershed is, or Watershed District, this is where the watershed is. So we run from almost Alexandria down to St. Cloud, so central Minnesota. Pretty decent sized watershed for around here. So 60, just over 650,000 acres, just over 1,000 square miles. It's parts of 5 counties. So you can see Pope, Douglas, Todd, majority is Stearns County, and then we have a little tiny chunk down in Meeker County. Overall, the watershed district was established in July of 1986. The actual chain of lakes down by Cold Spring and Richmond here, conservation group kind of got the ball rolling, and we went from there. We have 9 managers, so decent sized board. If you deal with boards, you're a little sympathetic to us. We have 9 folks on our board. We have 2 from Todd, 1 from Douglas, 1 from Pope, 1 from Meeker, and then 4 from Stearns. The managers are 3-year term. In our watershed, Stearns is the only one with term limits. So Stearns County folks, the managers are appointed by the county commissioners, by the way, and Stearns County folks have 3-year terms as the max, and then they have to go off the board. They can get back on after a term off. Other counties can be on there forever. Good or bad, they can be on there forever. Sometimes Stearns County, it's unfortunate we lose some of those good board members after 9 years. Other board members, they've been there a while. So we'll leave it at that. We have 6 staff. We have an administrator. You're looking at the public outreach coordinator, a few different names, but outreach and education guy. We have an office and finance manager, water resources manager. She sets up a lot of the programs, does the grant funding, kind of the on the ground BMPs. Ditch and permit coordinator. We are ditch authority for all the ditches within the watershed within Stearns County and within the watershed within Pope County. So ditch authority adds a whole bunch of different aspects to it there too. And we have a monitoring coordinator. So we do a ton of monitoring during the monitoring season, March through October, somewhere in there. And then some other times we've shuffled staff around a little bit. We might add a technician, so that technician and that monitoring coordinator positions kind of gone back and forth. And then interns, if we're lucky enough to get some. So we're located, our offices in Sauk Center, so kind of right in the middle of the watershed district. So we're going to chat about education versus outreach. I'm going to start with outreach first, because most of what we do for outreach, not the actual in-person, face-to-face education stuff. Most of our outreach is kind of the typical outreach that most organizations do. We have a website, pretty decent website. We've redone it the last year or so. So my role, previously, 3 or 4 days a week, I was at a school of some sort. With COVID, that's kind of shuffled around. Probably going to be doing a lot of the outreach and not a lot of the in-person education, at least through June of this year. So, so my focus has changed a lot to more outreach, social media, website, that kind of stuff. So again, we have a website, we've redone it the last year or so. Facebook, man, I try to post at least one thing, share a ton of partners information on our Facebook. You can see we do a native plant profile, so we do a plant of the week. We do an education spotlight, partner spotlight at least once a week. We do staff profiles, board profiles, and then we also do a ton of brochures, planting guides. We actually put out our own native wildflower and grass catalog, kind of to go with our community ad to help folks out there too. We have listservs, so we have 3 different listservs. I'll pop on those in a second. We do a lot of newsletters. We're trying to ramp up newsletters more and more. Most agencies, the tricky part with newsletters is, they're expensive. We don't have a huge budget. We're trying to do more online, more email newsletters, but at the same time, still reach some of those other folks, maybe with paper copies in certain areas. We do an annual report. It's one of our bigger newsletters. Statute requires us to do an annual report, so we just tweak it and make it into one of our newsletters. Radio spots, we try to do a lot of media stuff, a lot of radio spots. I'm on the radio once a week, one of our local channels. Scott, our administrator, once a month, he's on our different radio station once a month. Newspaper ads, columns, articles, you name it. We try to cover as much as we can with outreach, well, sticking with the budget. So our listservs, we've tweaked them over the years or over the last year or two. We have a general news one, general notifications, and then we have a drainage authority specific one. And then we have one for our board meeting agenda, minutes, that kind of stuff. The board meeting one, agendas, is a great one. We have a lot of folks that want to know when our board meetings are, if we have special meetings, our minutes, all that kind of stuff. So, and again, we're on Facebook. Education program. So here's kind of my baby. So spent a lot of time in the education programming, tweaking it to what it is now. I've been at the watershed since 2007. My background, a lot of fisheries, aquatic ecology, started out at UW Superior, then went to St. Cloud State and got my master's in education down there, bounced right into the watershed. So I grew up around here, moved around for college, somehow ended up right back in the town I started at. So, 2007, we were just getting going on education, even up to 2009. Then we had a pretty active board, pretty good board. Wanted to split the positions, focus more on education. So in the past, the education and monitoring was the same person. It was the same position. So lots of monitoring during the summer, and then education kind of filled in other places. Even in the winter, we were doing a lot of monitoring reports. Education was kind of on the sidelines. That's when, if you had time to do it. We had 2 water fests at that time. We had one down in the St. Cloud area and one in the Sauk Center area. So just 2 at that time, probably 500-600 kids total. Very limited school visits. You know, again, when it would fit in. We did have a rotating library board, display board that we would set up at schools. I'll talk about that. We kept that one going. We had an environmental quilt, which was a little tricky for me to get going on. That had been there. So what that was, we went to a lot of the smaller schools. We chose a school, did an art project. Those kids drew up what water quality means to them. And then we had them sketch it on a quilt square with fabric markers. And then we found a great group of fun old ladies that would sew them and put the quilt together. And then that went back to the school and hung up. It was a ton of work. Finding volunteers to put that quilt together was tricky too. So that's one that we haven't kept going. You know, that probably phased out like 2011 or so. Back then, 90% of our education activities were grant driven, you know, clean water funds, things like that. We didn't use a lot of our local tax levy toward education. And then outreach focus was almost all grant driven. So it was focused on getting landowners to do on Bmps and projects, to do on the ground projects more and more. And then to brag about those or talk about those programs a little bit. Kind of 2009, 2010 is when we started to make a big change toward education, really ramped up the programs. Funding came through quite a bit. Our board set aside a pretty good chunk of money for supplies and public outreach, and the program has expanded since then. So kind of things I'm going to touch on: school visits. Again, this is a normal year. COVID's kind of blew everything up. So this is kind of our historic programs. So school visits by far a bigger one. Community education kits, a lot of those. We do educational BMPs right on campuses of schools. Then the Waterfest field events. We do some funding requests, but we're getting away from that more and more, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So here's the Watershed District again, and color-coded with our school districts. And we have 14 districts that are part of, or I should say part of the school district falls within the watershed, and about 75 schools. And I use the term schools a little loosely. That's why you see it in quotes. Schools means it's a separate entity, like Osakis, for example. We have a elementary, a middle school, a high school, and we also have a private school here. So I kind of count those as 4. So it's 75 schools is the way I look at it. When I first started at the watershed, we only did education programs with that school district if the building itself was in the watershed. That got pretty tricky because we overlooked a large portion of our school districts. For example, the pinkish one up on the top here is Long Prairie Gray Eagle School District. Long Prairie schools are all in Long Prairie. They're not anywhere near the actual watershed. So we didn't do anything with them. But those folks are paying taxes, those kids, those students, those adults, they live within the watershed. So I kind of brought that before the board and said, we're missing a big chunk of our folks. So now we pretty much interact with them if they fall within the watershed. You know, especially down St. Cloud, Waite Park, St. Joe, down through there, some of our bigger schools, some of our largest populations, and we weren't necessarily serving them very well. So it's a big area. Sauk Center down to my furthest school, Painesville, Eden Valley, down through there, hour and a half drive. That's one way. So we have to be pretty, we schedule things very well, knowing our time restrictions and knowing our travel time, things like that. And then it gets a little tricky with schools too, because all of them have different start times. Ricori down by the Cold Spring, Richmond down through there, their high school actually used to start at 7:15, 7:30 in the morning. So if I was doing a program down there with the high school first hour, I would have to be at the office, set up and on the road by 6:30. So it got a little tricky. At first, my grand idea, and a lot of folks still do this, let's just give the schools the resources and the funding. That was a big thing that we did. The quote on here, so providing resource and funding is not always the most effective way to educate or do outreach. That's my experience. We could provide the school the funds and we could actually buy them the equipment and everything. But if we didn't have a teacher that was willing to do it, it didn't matter. Or the teachers are overwhelmed. They have their curriculum, they have their grad standards. They don't have time to do other programming necessarily. So we started doing more hands-on, more in-class presentations. Again, 3-4 days I'm at a school. And one day I potentially was at 5 different schools bouncing around as time allowed. So we figured out in a hurry, networking is the key. To find those teachers that are interested, or that school or that principal, to try to get in there. And once we get into a school, we start doing programming with one grade or one teacher, it gets well known, and then it's amazing how fast it spreads through there. We also used to do a lot more landowner projects, on the ground projects. Now we're kind of doing bigger P projects, but so we did a lot of demo projects, grant funding that we had available. I'll go into those a little bit more, kind of specifics on some of our examples. But names to the faces, local connections, trusted partners. I wouldn't get half of my projects or my education done if it wasn't for our partners. You'll see that especially when we get into Waterfest. I mean, they're beasts, they're monster programs. If I didn't have support from the communities and from our other agency folks, there's no way we could pull off what we do. So kind of what we're going to go through, I'll talk about Waterfest, the big monsters. A lot of communities do Waterfest, DNR got them going or got some of them going, and we've just expanded more and more. Field events, a few different kind of the standard ones we do. When I say standard, it's kind of that program, but then it gets tweaked to that school or to that grade or even to that teacher's requests. School visits, so in classroom visits, or maybe they come outside and meet me outside. Our library board, our rotating display board, and then our education kits, which we really have geared up with COVID, and I'll touch on those too. And then community education. We didn't do a lot of community education the first few years I was at the watershed. Now, pretty much every Tuesday and Thursday evening in the spring and the fall, I have a community education program of some sort. And then again, our education BMPs, I'll talk about some of those projects that we put on the ground that we now use more and more for education. So Waterfest, again, we started out with 2 when I got to the watershed. Now we have 5 and we partner with a bunch of other ones in the area. Our Frozen Fest, so I'm kind of starting in the beginning of the year, the calendar year, and going through there. The Frozen Fest, is probably our more recent one that we developed. We just were missing a lot of Sartell and St. Cloud students that live within the watershed. And we were maxed out on our other Waterfest. So we had to figure out how the heck can we serve these students or get these students involved in Waterfest. And most of the requests have been other schools saying, hey, I know this school goes to a Waterfest. How can we get involved? Or how can we be part of that? So it's expanded more and more. We didn't have any more time in the spring and the fall. So the Frozen Fest is indoor at St. Ben's College in St. Joe. And that's mostly Sartell and St. Cloud students. Quick heads up, fourth graders, for the most part, is who goes to our Waterfest. And currently, within the watershed district, within the Sauk River Watershed, every fourth grade student, every fourth grade classroom gets invited to a Waterfest. Public and private schools, even homeschools, all the fourth graders are invited. I'm going to say 90% attend. There's a few smaller schools that we don't have there, but overall, Waterfest by far are consistently, we serve more students with that, with Waterfest than any other way. And the other thing with our Waterfest is we have great financial partners on this. The watershed kicks in quite a bit of the funding, but we also have the cities, we do fundraising, private donations to get these going, because our Waterfests are completely free for the schools. In fact, we even pay the busing to get the kids to the Waterfest and back. And I'll go into those a little bit coming up here, but Frozen Fest, Sartell St. Cloud, we're capped out at 500 students on that one. We might actually have to add another day onto this one. About 100 volunteers, and we have 18 education stations. And those education stations are manned by watershed staff or other agency staff. So Soil and Water, County, DNR, those folks are who have volunteered their time and talents to come to these events. We don't pay the presenters, it's all volunteer. St. Cloud State Environmental Program, they send a ton of students to work here to do the events. We have high school presenters for this one too. Middle Sauk Waterfest, that one kind of bounces between Sauk Center and Melrose. That's kind of the center of the watershed. That is an older Waterfest. That one was going well before I got here. Again, 500 students, 100 volunteers, 21 education stations. So a lot of these Waterfests, we have 3 rotations. So when I say 21 stations, there's actually 3 sets of 7. So each fourth grader gets to go to 7 different education stations. Most of the time, 25 minutes to half an hour right in there. And then they rotate to the next one. So yeah, they get 7 different education stations throughout that day. Busing gets a little tricky, timing gets a little tricky because again, schools start at different times, but for the most part, we're rolling by 9 o'clock and we go till 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Lower Sauk and Three Rivers are the 2 we have in St. Joe, and these are back to back. So Lower Sauk was going in the early 2000s, and that's another one. We had so many requests, we couldn't fit all the students in there. Just logistics and timing becomes tricky. So we added a second day onto that, and that's the Three Rivers Waterfest. So I would say these 2 are my most dedicated volunteers and agency presenters, because they show up 2 days, back-to-back days. You know, they rotate through in one day, a couple hundred students, they come back and are willing to do it the second day. We hold these events rain or shine. If it rains, most of the time we're going to move to one of the local colleges like St. Ben's or St. Cloud State. So we pretty much go through with these no matter what the weather. For the Lower Sauk one, 550 students, so St. Joe, St. Cloud, Waite Park students, which is all part of the St. Cloud School District. And then the Three Rivers Waterfest is St. Cloud, and it's more the St. Cloud students. So the St. Joe, kind of the suburb students from St. Cloud go to the first day, and then the second one or more of the in St. Cloud students. And again, all the private and public schools are invited to these. 24 education stations. These are set up at Millstream Park in St. Joe, which has a huge creek. Millstream Creek runs through the middle of it. So these stations, kids might be putting on waders and going in there and catching aquatic insects. They might be fishing in the creek. They might be learning about green energy, solar farms, soil runoff, fishing, you name it, everything in between. So they have a really good diverse kind of rotation, and we purposely set it up that way. So the Waterfest, for the whole year, we got about 2,500 fourth graders, about 200 teachers and parents, and about 550 volunteers. The logistics are a monster on these, but we've been doing them, and we do them, I think we do them pretty well. So we've got them laid out pretty consistent every year. We get the same players, the same folks, the same agency people that help out. They are lifesavers. There's no way we could do these big events without the community involvement. The watershed, we fund the supplies. We pay any venue fees if there is any. Most of these city parks, the city donates the use of the facilities. If we have to move to, let's say, St. Ben's or somewhere, it's a small deposit. They even give us a really big break on these. We do provide the volunteer lunches. We provide busing. The students or the schools are responsible for feeding their teachers and their students. Pretty much we cover the rest. Volunteers provide their time, their talents, their supplies. If need be, we'll kick in a little money if folks need supplies or need large amounts of supplies. One of the presenters does, but for the most part, these agency folks bring their own stuff with them. And again, we get donations from the cities and other entities. There's no way we could fund these on our own at the watershed. All right, so our field events. So these are kind of the Waterfest, but bigger and longer and usually older kids. The shore program, river rallies on the water, and our field days. About 2,500 students in those two. And then we have our partner programs. I'm going to go into these kind of one at a time. But again, about 2,500 students, and these tend to be the older students, junior high and up. So river rallies, I would say they're like Waterfest, but older kids, usually junior high. Depends on the school we have. Some schools 6th grade is elementary, some it's junior high. So it all depends. So less stations, but longer stations, more complex concepts, more data gathering. Really good way to collect data and then bring it back to the schools or to the classroom. And then the teacher's got a lot of good data to work into his or her curriculum from there on. Also a good one, data collection, and then I come into the school and do a lot of follow-ups throughout the year. You can see 2 stations right here. One is a fishing station. This is in Melrose, above the dam in Melrose. 7th graders. We actually measure the fish, kind of do a spreadsheet. Students figure out what they caught, why they caught them, size, things like that. Another one you can see in the background is Prairie Woods out of Spicer with their big canoe. And students go out there and they learn the history of kind of the fur trade in central Minnesota, kind of the Voyager's big canoe. It's awesome. And then our shore program is even the older kids. Most of these, almost all these are senior high. It is research and education. We've really ramped up this one, won a few state awards, won a watershed, Minnesota Watershed Award on this one. And it's a week-long, sometimes 2-week-long program. It's a big commitment, not only for myself, but also for that school. The first day, it's field day and collection. So the data they're collecting, they do a macro sample, so aquatic insect sample. They take a water chemistry sample. They do some stream geology measurements, and they might actually do some soil sieves, some soil sampling. And then day 2, you can see kind of the schedule. The second day, in class, or if it's nice, we're outside, we actually ID the aquatic insects, figure out the water quality score based on the bugs that they've collected. We do that one the second day, so that way, the bugs are still alive and kicking. Day 3 is usually water chemistry. Day 4, we look at their stream geology. Day 5 and 6, the students work on their data. And then they do a presentation on what they collected. So for example, and this is at Frogtown Park in Cold Spring, students go out there, they're in groups, they collect all this data, they crunch it all, they do analysis, and then they present they might do a PowerPoint to their class, they might do a presentation to their school, they might even do an article in the local newspaper of what their data tells them about the water quality. So based on the bugs, the water chemistry, the stream geology, what is going on in that stream? What's the water quality there? And the students are the ones that come up with the final presentation and come up with their analysis. It is an awesome program, super time consuming, but well worth it. You know, this is like a 2-week commitment. Almost always done in the spring and the fall, which gets a little tricky, especially in the fall. You know, we got to hustle out there and collect data and get these kids out as much as possible while the weather is nice out. Field days. So again, we're trying to fit as many as we can, get as many students outside. April, May, early June, maybe. And then September and October. We have some schools that consistently do these year after year. Both these pictures are the Osaka students. One is the 7th graders, the other one's 5th grade. So they kind of rotate around to different stations. They collect data. The top left picture, we get them out on pontoon. It is amazing. Even Osaka, you know, we have a ginormous lake, small town. How many students in 5th grade have never been on the lake before? How many students have never been on a pontoon? It's amazing to me. As you know, even a community like Osaka, it amazed me. I grew up on the lake in Osaka, so you know, it was kind of mind-boggling for me the first couple times we did this. And again, about 2,500 students we do with field days in the spring and the fall. And these counts are ones that I actually see the students face to face, or other watershed staff see them face to face. And then a ton of partner programs. And these are a lot of events that we do in the winter or when the weather's not so great out. Science Rocks, we partnered with Resource Training and Solutions a lot for developing these programs. Science Rocks is at St. Cloud State during holiday break, so there's no college students on there. It is spread throughout all the science buildings. Kids rotate around to different stations, longer sessions. Project Earth is at St. John's, and that's for 7th grade. We realized, and a lot of our partners realized, we don't do a lot, or there isn't a lot of outdoor education resources for junior high kids. So we started to develop more and more of these, and Project Earth is one of those. And this one's at St. John's, and it's October, which it's a crapshoot on weather. You know, there's no such thing as bad weather, just poor clothing, right? So we try to gear these kids up. You can see the ones going out in the big canoe here, they're pretty bundled up. Science Fest, that's a 2nd day, kind of the Project Earth, more outdoors, and stations inside at St. Ben's. Eden Valley, we do a big science day in May out there on their campus. All the 4th, 5th, and 6th graders get outside and do different stations throughout that day. And then we partner with Envirothon, Soil and Water, folks like that a lot with our partner programs. School visits. So here is by far a normal year, non-COVID year, where most of my time is spent. Again, 3-4 days, at least a week. Some days I might go to 5 schools. Some days, for example, Sartell's one of our bigger schools. They have 13 sections in each grade. So if I'm going to get through all the 7th graders doing one program, that's probably 3-4 days that I'm there for a block just to get through all the students. So K through 12 presentations. Again, 4th grade's a big focus, grad standard on water, the water cycle. Then we get into 7th grade with life science, 10th grade with life science, and then a lot of high school electives, you know, college bio, AP bio, classes like that. We have some schools that have botany, we have some schools that have zoology programs, environmental sciences, so we can get them out there. Most visited school districts, Melrose, Rocori, Osakis, and Sartell. Most requested topics, macroinvertebrates by far. We do macroinvertebrates year round, which, you know, a tough day to be me. Once in a while, I have to go break ice and collect aquatic insects on the main stem of the river, but we can still get some pretty good aquatic insects. Students can still get data from them. So we'll do them year round. Spring and the fall, then the students are collecting. Water chemistry, whether I bring in water samples or maybe the students bring in a water sample from their, you know, their pond, their creek, their river, their local lake, things like that. A lot with habitats, conservation, rain gardens. We talked a lot about native plants, pollinator gardens, things like that. And then water properties, a lot with 4th grade, you know, different terms. We kind of get out of the textbook and we can demonstrate condensation and evaporation and the water cycle. lake turnover, stratification, trying to demonstrate a lot of that right in front of the students really drives those concepts home a lot more. And that's about 5,000 students that we see for the in-class presentations. And that's, again, me in a school face-to-face with the kids. Almost all our programs have been developed working with educators. You know, we did Project Learning Tree and Project Wet and a lot of those programs, and then tweaked them from there. Or the majority were just students or just teachers saying, we really need a hands-on version of this. What can you do with it? Some presentations we tweaked over the years were epic failures. You just keep working on them. Melrose, I love Melrose School. We have 2 teachers, unfortunately, that are retiring from Melrose, but they were the ones that let me do a lot of programs or develop a lot of programs. And then we'd meet afterwards and say, well, geez, that didn't work out. Or that was a really good idea. How about we tweak it this way? Or this is what the grad standard is. We need to include that in that presentation somehow. So yearly education numbers, I just kind of pulled the last 4 years. Again, 2020 was a train wreck. We did a few programs right away in the beginning of the school year, but then COVID hit hard, and most schools I wasn't allowed into. Did a few outdoor programs with them. And even through this year, we haven't gone and done anything with students in person. Even the spring is not looking good as numbers keep rising more and more, especially in central Minnesota with students. A lot of our schools, a lot of COVID numbers right now. So you can see the numbers, they've crept up over the years. You know, about 500 some hours, 600 hours I spent doing education events. Those are actually at the events doing them. Kids, 10 to 12,000 students, somewhere right in there. Adults, 2,000 to 3,000 adults right through there that we're reaching, that are actually going to an event or that we're seeing face to face. Our community ed, we do a ton in Zoom now, but we used to do those in person at the different schools for adult education. Traveling library board. This is one we would go on a Monday, set up a display board somewhere in their school, and it would stay there for the whole week. We'd pick it up that Friday or the next Monday and then shuffle it to another school, pretty much through the winter. So this one started about November and went until April, May through there. The teachers, I would send out a survey, and the teachers would kind of tell me what topic they wanted. We favor elementary schools on this one a little bit more. Try to keep it interactive as possible. Started out with one display board. Now I'm up to 2 or 3, or we're up to 2 or 3, rotating around just to get through all the schools that wanted these. Lots of windshield time. Education kits. We've tweaked these over the years. These are kits that we actually hand out to the classroom or to the teacher, and they can go through there and pick out their lessons out of it. A lot of them are themed, like freshwater habitat and through there. You heard me in the beginning say this isn't always the best way, actually me presenting or doing more hands-on with the students, but we also have teachers that just want to stick with their thing, and if we can give them supplies, they like that a lot more. These kits were developed from talking to teachers. Like, what do you need? What do you need for supplies? What would you put in this kit? Community education. So you can see the whole list. Again, pretty much every Tuesday, Thursday in the spring and the fall, I was doing a community ed program. Kind of the more popular ones: rain barrels, rain gardens, native plants, landscaping your septics. You know, partnered with these community ed programs a lot. Partnered with Soil and Water and other agencies to kind of tweak the program. Most of these are, you know, educators don't have a typical schedule. I'm not any different. Most of these are in the evenings. You know, so I'm working Tuesday, Thursday nights. Most popular, St. Cloud, Alexandria. They have great luck with community ed. Do a lot of master gardener events, presentations with them. Garden tours in the summer, and we favor gardens like rain gardens and prairie restorations. We started to do a beer and blooms program, which is wildly popular. Because who doesn't like to go out and look at a bunch of plants and then end at a brewery, having a couple beers and listening to a public speaker, agency folks, or some gardener, master gardener. Those would sell out without a doubt. And then youth programming. Pretty much every school does have summer school of some sort. And a lot of the summer schools are the kids that struggle a little bit. So if we could do more hands-on, or we could get out of the textbook and do more experiential things with those, great. Parent-child classes. Mom and dad get them out fishing with the students. Maybe that mom and dad, they're not fisher people, but if there's somebody there to help them, to give them the equipment, they will absolutely take their kid there. It's awesome. Science camps, 4-H, fair booths, all that kind of stuff. Educational Bmps. So these are on the ground Bmps of some sort. A lot of them are rain gardens, prairie restorations, maybe some shoreline restoration. Several of them are programs or projects that got started by other agencies, and then they kind of timed out, and then we took over and maybe we spruced them up, or maybe we kind of just kept going with them. Osakis, school in Osakis had to put in a stormwater pond. They did an addition onto their school. We turned that into kind of a wet rain garden, or kind of a wetland restoration a little bit. All native plants out there, outdoor classroom kind of environment, right on campus. Sauk Center, school's located right along the Sauk River. They got a huge shoreline restoration prairie area out there. Melrose has a creek that runs, or a public ditch actually, that runs right through campus. Soil and Water did a restoration there. We now go out and add more plants to it. We get the kids out there. We do aquatic insects right in that little stream. Eden Valley has an outdoor classroom. It's a prairie restoration and a stream bank restoration. We help fund that, and now we do a lot of education with it. You can see a lot of these schools, we have an actual facility or a Bmp right on campus, so we don't have to bus them around. Students just walk out there and meet us out there. Almost all of them are public property, so other folks can go out there. St. Joe Kennedy School, they have a 26-acre prairie planting out there, which also has trails for the community to walk through there. So a great one to do signage out there. Maybe we spruce it up a little bit. We do burns out there, invite the public, do a couple pieces in the newspaper why we're doing this. Initially, the funds might have been used. We might have supplied funds, supplies, plants, even equipment for the school that they can keep. Maybe it's waders and macro nets that school keeps, instead of having me shuffle them back and forth all over the place, which also becomes important for invasive species. Now they stay in one spot instead of me shuffling stuff to multiple schools. And COVID adjustments, 2020, everything blew up. We had to rethink education and outreach a ton. Some schools, it was amazing from, Osakis to St. Cloud, Alexandria to St. Cloud, the differences in schools and who could come in and who couldn't, who could do education events and that kind of stuff. Sauk Watershed, we have a pretty diverse area. We have downtown Metro, downtown St. Cloud within there. Plus we have a lot of really small schools. We have a lot of we have a couple, Catholic schools that only have 6-7 kids per grade. So it's amazing the difference, especially with COVID. Now, pretty much nothing going on. We're not going in person. So what we did instead is we expanded our education kits a lot, and we added a lot of kits. Almost all the stations that were at Waterfest, I figured out how to put them into a trunk, get them to the school, and the teacher then can use them. More requested ones like macroinvertebrates, aquatic insects, I had to make 3 or 4 different trunks because we had so much demand from the different schools. The way we set it up, I would deliver the kit on Mondays to those schools. They had them all week. I would pick them back up on Thursday. And then our COVID recommendations where they had to sit, we would disinfect and then let them sit for 72 hours. So they sat Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off, they went to another school. There were pros and cons behind it. It's not the same as getting the kids outside. It's not the same as having a person present or come into the classroom. Lots of windshield time, lots of running around. But at the same time, they got something. They got these kits. The teachers, a lot of our teachers had been to the Waterfest and had us come in and speak. So they kind of knew what we had done. I helped them out. They made it work within their school or their classroom. In community ed, this was one that expanded or kind of blew up with COVID. So what we did is, again, all of them turned into Zoom. And instead of doing 5 rain barrel classes in 5 different communities, I met with a lot of the community education programs or the directors and said, how do we do this where we all can have it at the same time? And they were all very supportive, because sometimes we just didn't have enough folks from one community to run a class either. Maybe we only had 3 or 4. So what we did is we came up with a calendar. So let's say Rain Gardens is on May 21st. All the community ed programs that want advertise that one class. They all charge the same thing, $8. The watershed, we don't charge the schools, but they charge to cover their expenses. And also you need to charge something so folks that sign up actually show up. The schools do all the logistics and all the advertising. And then the Monday before the class, they all send me their class lists. And then I send out the Zoom invite to all those folks. After the class, folks that want, we give everybody an information packet, including a native plant book. And then we have a couple drawings, so like native seeds or something like that. So we're giving them the in-person education in person through Zoom, and then we provide them resources for those that are interested. It is amazing how well this has worked. I had my hesitation. We now have communities outside the watershed that are looking to join with us. Most of my classes have 30 or 40 people in each one. Did a shoreline restoration. I actually had to turn it into 2 days because we had 70 some people sign up for it. It's amazing. I don't know what the future looks like on that one. You know, people would rather potentially, there's a whole group of people that we weren't serving necessarily. Those folks that want to sit in their house, have a cocktail in their pajamas and attend a Zoom class. There's a whole nother group that actually wants to be in person. You know, so are we going to do some sort of hybrid thing moving forward? I don't know yet. Schools are leaning toward that. It's going to get tricky. So I don't know what our community education program looks like. If it's going to be a lot of Zoom, if it's going to be in person, if it's going to be a hybrid, I don't know. All right, so there is my contact info. How'd I do on time? Oh, not bad. Usually I'm really chatty, so this was pretty good. There's my contact info, our website. Again, questions, you can always email me. You can call us whenever. We're kind of working from home, but we're slowly transitioning back into the office. So I'm going to stop my share and then we'll do some questions if folks have questions.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, and I really appreciate it. Just an incredible amount of programs that you guys run, the diversity of programs, and really neat to see the tour of all the different efforts that you guys put forward. And so thank you first of all for sharing. And I know that you know, it's always tough because we give these webinars and there's an audience out there, and normally they would clap for you and you would get to hear our appreciation expressed. And so please
community ed,
try to express it on their behalf. Thank you.
Community ed's been the same thing. Nobody gets, like, you know, my goofy jokes and all that over Zoom as well. I don't hear the groans and the awkward chuckles for my jokes that way. Yeah.
Yeah, dad jokes are underappreciated. We have some questions coming in, so I'll just remind folks, if you have questions for Adam, please submit them through the Q&A function, and I'll moderate those and narrate them to Adam, and we can go through questions that you all have. So just a reminder to you that first question. So first, the person said excellent work and commitment, which I was second. And then the first question was, is there a mechanism where the district can measure how these events turn students to study natural resources and or sciences post high school?
We've talked about that a lot. You know, it's soft science. So we try to do some data collection, numbers, things like that. Spoke with the teachers a lot. There's just so many variables. You know, did I do an awesome job and now that student wants to work for the watershed the rest of their life? I don't know. I'd be open to suggestions and recommendations what other folks have done, but you know, it's tricky to track some of this stuff. Yeah.
So how do you guys evaluate your programs when you're looking at it, at the beginning or end of a year, and you're deciding how you're going to allocate your effort? How do you do that evaluation among all the different programs that, frankly, all of them seem really great. And for me as a fisheries biologist, I don't. It'd be difficult for me to figure out how I would allocate my effort.
So we work with the teachers a ton. Waterfest, we send out after a Waterfest, we send out a survey to all the teachers, and we have them do a survey with their students too, like what stations did they like the best, what presenters necessarily, that kind of stuff. So that kind of tweaks our efforts. A lot of it is just meeting with the teachers. Even community ed, we do follow-up surveys. We do surveys with the community education directors too, like, what worked, what didn't work. Sometimes, that class was an epic failure, or we offered this community ed class and we only had 4 people sign up. Well, not looking good on that one. So it's a lot of just follow-up surveys, word of mouth, tweaking as we go kind of thing. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. The second question, how do you keep teachers and volunteers to stay on this program year after year? And this person mentioned that similar programs that they maybe work with or see elsewhere seem to fade due to lack of volunteer interest or budgets.
That's a tough one. We try to promote within the school the best we can. One of the tougher ones for us, like Melrose, I said, we have 2 science teachers that are retiring. I hope that they mention, or that the principal or other folks mention, like, here's these watershed programs, they're a great addition to your classroom. So we just try to, you saw that one picture I had, we do an education catalog. I try to send that out. I try to, do direct mailing to teachers. Trying to focus, like 4th grade teachers, here's the Waterfest, here's the invite, new teachers, any questions, that kind of thing. And a lot of teachers, also within schools, they're trading grades, or they swap grades, and they move around quite a bit. Which gets a little tricky, because this year I had a 5th grade teacher that went down to 1st grade, and she's like, well, how do we do aquatic insects with 1st grade? It's, that's a whole retooling, regrouping. We figured it out from there. So it's just try to keep them engaged, let them know the best we can that these programs are out there. If we have funding sources, I might say that these funds are available. Here's what, I think we could do on campus with it, or we could do in your classrooms with it, that kind of stuff.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and on the difference between the ages going from the 5th graders to the 1st graders, you mentioned, some of your programs just target 4th graders. I think 7th graders was another level that you're targeting. It seems like you've got these somewhat tailored to the attention span and the maturity of the audience in terms of the students. And so one of the questions we had from our audience was, what age of kids do you feel are most interested in learning about water? And I'd sort of expand on that, both interested and able to follow along meaningfully. Is there a sweet spot for you, or how do you guys decide that?
As a presenter, and this is my fault sometimes too, we do a lot of upper grades. So 4th grade is a good fit. We do a lot with 4th grade because they're water cycles and their grad standards. And then up from there, 7th grade, my favorite students to work with are senior high, and especially electives, because those students want to be there. Younger groups, I struggle with. I've tried over the years, I try to tweak stuff in that. Katie was our technician, and she actually just moved to Wisconsin, took a different job. She was awesome at K through 2nd grade programming. She did way better than I ever could. Time plays a role too, that there's just only so many hours in that. I've found that over the years, the kindergarten through 2nd grade teachers are the ones that like the kits a lot better. I don't know if that's because I don't present very well to the little people, or they just do a better job. So those are the ones that check out the kits or use them a lot more. Again, 4th grade, junior high, all the way up through electives. Especially electives, man, like college bio and some of these microbiology classes, and that they're looking for hands-on activities for their students. Get out of the classroom, stop looking at PowerPoints and reading the textbook, and actually get out there and crunch the numbers and do some collection.
Yeah, oh, that's neat. Yeah, quite a diversity of different students to try to teach to and tailor your presentations and materials to. Um, have you noticed any changes in the number of adults? So that this person said, you have a growing group of adults that are getting more interested in learning about water quality, and if so, how do you reach out to adult age groups?
That is probably our, how do I want to say this? That's what we're going to focus the most on in the next couple of years. It's tough. It really is. Like, we have a pretty good audience that attends the community ed, that attends the field days and events, and they're awesome and they're motivated. It's preaching to the choir quite a bit though. So we have to look at, do we focus on shoreland owners? If we want to do a shoreline program, maybe we do a direct mailing to them. Maybe we do a program just for shoreline owners on Lake Osagas, for example, or on another water body. So you almost have to tweak it for their specific region or their specific issue and kind of go from there. Because again, our community ed, we're getting a lot of the interested people in that. But if we want to get everybody, well, now we've got to kind of tweak that class or that message for those folks. And that's kind of our goal the next couple of years, is to really focus on that. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of money and a lot of time sometimes. So try to find that balance a little bit too. But yeah, our outreach and adult education, that's going to be our big focus the next couple of years.
Okay, thanks. And then similarly with the next couple of years, you mentioned that it's still a little bit up in the air how you plan to move forward with COVID. And I'm based here in Michigan, where we're having similarly high numbers. Do you have any recommendations for folks who might be in a similar position as you in terms of how they think about balancing their activities moving forward in this year and into the future? Not so much from the health perspective, but more from the perspective of how can we be effective, while still being healthy.
Like the education kits was a big thing for me. And that came from talking to the teachers. Like, all right, so we can't come in the classroom. You're there, you want to do this presentation. Would it work for us to just give you the equipment, maybe come up with some lesson plans? And that was just talking to the educators or the teachers. A lot of what we do, I couldn't come into the schools, and that was a school thing. So then it was like, all right, teachers, what do you need from us? Do you want us to do YouTube lectures? Do you want, Facebook Live, that kind of thing? And they steered away from that, and it was mostly just giving them the equipment and the supplies. So I think the education kits is still going to be a big thing in the next few years. Hopefully we get to do more in-person presentations. And the kits are a lot of work. I drop them off on a Monday, pick them up on a Thursday. Mondays, I'm running all over the district, shuffling kits around. But it's, to get that education message out there, it's what we are willing to do around COVID right now and around other issues. And the display board, the library board, when we used to do that, again, we'd set it up on Mondays. That was a lot of running around, but it was wildly popular. Teachers loved that. And then whether they came up with lesson plans or how they followed up with it, or they had us come in and speak afterwards. And that was a good one for all, we kind of geared it toward elementary students. We put it in the school. We called it a library board because at first we would always put it in the library. But from there, it kind of got tweaked more to the elementary. So, the big thing is talk to the teachers. Find those teachers that are focused on science or water. Big tip is work on the new teachers. Not to rip on teachers. I work with a ton of them, but some in their older teachers get set in their ways, and this is what they're going to do no matter what. So if you can contact some of the newer teachers, they potentially be the go-getters. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Good hot tip. All right, I think we're working our way through the end of the questions. I don't see any more questions in my list here, so I'm going to give a last call for any questions for Adam. I'll take this opportunity again to say thank you, Adam, for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Really appreciate it. And Just in closing, we will be again posting the recording of this video to the MGLP's website, so that if folks want to share it with people that they know or think might be interested or benefit from it, please do. And please check out more Midwest Glacial Lakes Partnership webinars here in the future. We've got one coming up next week with some presenters out of Minnesota talking about water quality for Cisco. So that said, I see no more questions. So we're going to wrap up here right at the top of the hour. Again, thank you, Adam, and thank you everyone for attending. Have a good day.